We should be getting the president's budget soon, so that'll be our starting point. What I'm doing locally is talking with folks about their top priorities. Last time we were doing budgeting, we were able to get $200,000 for the mitigation plan for the lower Santa Cruz, and that will continue to be a top issue. In terms of the appropriation process, I think there's some optimism that we're going to go back to a regular order and actually be able to have some committee hearings on the appropriations and make everything very transparent and open to the public because it is the taxpayers' dollars that we're spending. But really do want to hear from folks about your local issues that we might be able to work with in terms of getting funding.
Very good. Now, earmarks, of course, are banned, Congresswoman, but in-house. If they weren't, is there one project that is near and dear to your heart that you would love to see funded or increased funding to?
Yeah, absolutely. The lower Santa Cruz mitigation. I really would like to see that completed by the Army Corps of Engineers. And I just was appointed to the Water Subcommittee on Transportation and Infrastructure. So we'll be working very closely with the Corps and with the supervisors. Supervisor Miller is here now on continuing to get that done. But we saw the effects of the horrible floods we had last year. And we know that it's just a matter of time when that's going to happen. So that's a top priority.
Congressman, your thoughts on the upcoming budget process and the legitimacy of it in terms of the process itself and the openness and the transparency you've been talking about?
I have been a big proponent of open order and regular order. But the taxpayer has to realize we haven't done regular order since the 1970s. Think about that. We've been operating on stagnant rules, interpreted rules, party rules, mitigating them, utilizing the rule when we want to, bypassing them when we don't want to. And it's been both sides. We have got to get back to the process because Congress's first job is to pass a budget, then go through the appropriation process, which means 12 bills, whether it be the VA, Department of Defense, Interior. You got to go through that and have the discussion. That is key and paramount to that effort. And many of you know I did not vote for current leadership in the House, and that was one of the major reasons. I'm very good at being on the floor. As a legislator, I was ranked one of the top people in the country. And the reason being is we understand how to work that process. You know, we passed 6 major bills. We actually had 11 amendments. We saved the taxpayer over $1 billion by going through and working with ideas that we get from you. That's how regular order is. And when you take me and multiply it by 435 by doing the same thing, by having an open process, then you get back to transparency. Then there's nothing hidden between the seams of legislation, and you get exactly what the taxpayer wants.
I'm going to give you the same question I gave the Congresswoman, and that is, if earmarks were allowed, is there anything near and dear in your heart that you would say, yes, this is a must funding?
Yes, I work a lot with veterans. And was that for me or was that for him?
It actually was the Congressman.
Yeah.
You know what? Veterans is our next topic.
You're on a roll. If we're talking about earmarks, I'm not going to say which one I want, but we've got to get back to the plenary power of Congress. We made earmarks a bad word because there was lots of secret deals. We need to reform the process because part of the power of Congress was actually to institute where money was going for projects throughout this country. That's part of our constitutional boundaries and something that we were afforded as a legislative body. But it's got to be forthright. It's got to be transparent. So everybody gets a chance to see that it's an equal opportunity. If you don't, what you're doing is you're allowing the executive branch to do all your spending. And in particular, the agencies, the fourth branch of government that has no accountability. We've seen that with the IRS, we've seen that with the Interior and a number of issues and rulings. And so from that standpoint, I would just say, how about we have an open process about the earmark process, how to reform it, where everybody has a seat, transparent, where everybody knows what the process is, and that there's no winners and losers by special deals.
Very good. And Congresswoman.
Thank you. I work a lot with veterans, and I want to recognize Oscar Ramirez, who's here, who's a community leader for our veterans. And I'd like to see funding for a vet center in Casa Grande. We really need that.
Well, that is a very good segue. There's been a lot of attention to the Veterans Administration the last year, most of it negative. There's been some reforms, and you talked a lot, Congresswoman, on the Veterans Committee. What can you tell us about where things are today and what you see for this agency in providing care for our veterans in the future?
I was on the conference committee that negotiated the reform in terms of access to health care, which should make it easier for our veterans who live more than 40 miles from a VA hospital to get care in their local community. But we're continuing to work with our veteran service organizations to make sure that's happening. And I just want to mention Palmer Miller, who's also here from my Casa Grande office, who's our veteran outreach worker. Palmer is my ear to the ground when it comes to veterans issues, to find out what's working and what isn't. And I will tell you, there is so much we need to do with veterans. I mean, we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg, and then we'll continue to work with the communities and take care of our veterans and make sure they get the benefits that they've already earned.
Do you know, Congresswoman, if there's going to be any further ramifications for those administrators in the VA who were falsifying records, and if there's any reforms to the process so it would make it more difficult for a dishonest bureaucrat to falsify the records to show shorter waiting times and shorter lists?
There has to be accountability. If people aren't doing their job, they should be fired. And that is part of the reform in the comprehensive bill. Whether that's happening or not, I just asked my VA staff this morning. We got some reports about things that are still not being done. Are those people being fired? We'll continue to look into that. There's got to be accountability and oversight.
Congressman, your thoughts on what's been going on with the VA, how it plays with your government oversight? You're on the oversight committee, correct?
Absolutely.
And how much time have you spent on the veterans issue in that capacity?
A lot. And I want to make a shout out to Larry in my office and Sean. If you visited my Facebook, you'll know Sean because he's a wounded warrior. And those two gentlemen plus Penny have done it, the lowman chair of our office. What we saw was a despicable action by a government to try to hide a problem with our veterans and that health care. And as a healthcare professional, I believe everybody deserves good health care. You've got to be a participant in it. I'm not a big fan of government health care because I think it's between you and a healthcare provider. And that's where I will tell the Congresswoman, she helped mitigate a good window. Is it perfect? No, but it's a good starting point. That window was open for 40 miles so that we could start that dialogue of a veteran being able to access their doctor of choice, getting the timely care and making sure that occurs. And so I would actually ask my veterans, and I'm sure Ann would look at this in a positive manner too, is that we need to hear from you. Veterans groups talk amongst themselves. Who's not getting the care? Who's not being able to be seen? Especially in specialty care, whether it's cancer or heart disease or diabetes. Start leaning out to a friend, a fellow veteran, and tell us who's not getting that care. Because there's amazing what kind of doors the Congresswoman and I can actually open up. But we need to keep the light on the VA. Accountability, accountability, accountability. And I think that the more that we do that, I think the future for our healthcare system benefits when our veterans get the healthcare that they deserve and are given.
Thank you. Congressman Gosar mentioned something about this window. Can you elaborate on what he meant? What does that mean now to veterans who might be outside geographically, further away from a VA center? What is it that was changed?
Well, it used to be that the veterans had to go to either Prescott, Phoenix, or Tucson. And we've got veterans who live hundreds of miles away. And it's a 2-day trip for them. And so what we were able to negotiate was, if you live more than 40 miles from a vet center, you can get care in your local community if you want. And it's the veteran's choice to do that, so that they're in control of where they go for that care. Now, some veterans have a doctor they really, really like in Tucson or Phoenix or Prescott. They're willing to make that travel. So it really just expands their choice they're in control. They can decide where they want to go.
Do you foresee that geographical range expanding, maybe statewide, so that a veteran could choose, a veteran in Tucson could say, there's a great doctor in Apache Junction I want to go see?
I can see that happening, and I think that, that's the whole point. Making sure they get the best care possible, and as the Congressman mentioned, it's especially difficult when you come to specialty care, where there may be only one person in the whole VA system in Arizona or in the region, and so I can see that expanding.
Congressman, would you favor such an expansion?
I'm absolutely in full support of that expansion. And I think the way that you change the model is actually show the successful application of where you see it being driven, so that you see timely visits for our veterans. That we find a network, and part of the problem is the reach for the veterans or the Veterans Administration to doctors that would take them, to take our veterans. They need a network. That's the other part of the problem is that that's how convoluted this process was. Not only were they backed up not getting the care and falsifying records, but folks, they weren't doing their due diligence to make sure that they had proper resources that veterans could access as well. I'll give you a quick example. We met with the acting VA director at the time, and Matt Salmon was at his urologist, and he said, listen, doctor, didn't you used to see veterans before? He said, yeah, but they've never come to renew with me. So here's the opportunity where somebody would actually be able to see their veterans, but there was no renewal on the contract, nor were they actually allowing patients to be seen by him. So I think this is a golden opportunity to reverse that aspect, because healthcare really is a personal application. This is personal to you. You've got to be involved, you've got to be comfortable with somebody that you care, that you like, because that part is part of the symbiosis of total healthcare.
And Tom, can I mention one other aspect of that? I introduced legislation to protect whistleblowers, and they've got to be protected because, and it's not just whistleblowers within the system, but it's also veterans. So we were hearing from people who said, I was concerned about what I saw happening, but I was afraid to report it, either because I was afraid there'd be retaliation against me as a patient or as an employee. And so that's got to be part of that oversight, Paul, that people have to be free to make complaints and know that they're going to be followed up on.
And I'd like to just touch base is that the rule of law. Somebody's got to be accountable. I look across this room, and every one of you, when something happens, are accountable in your daily lives, in your house, in your business, in the way you walk and talk. But bureaucrats aren't. That should not be tolerated. There has to be consequences for action. And that's the thing I find so despisable about Washington, D.C. is we have no rule of law, because the agencies just get away with whatever they want to do. The bureaucrats think they're on a different playing field, and that's what's wrong. America functions best when we're all created the same. I think that's part of our Founding Fathers' Declaration, is it not?
Very good, thank you. We're going to turn your attention now to transportation and infrastructure. Congresswoman, you are on that committee, are you not?
I am on that committee, and I just was assigned to the aviation subcommittee, the water subcommittee, and the highways. And we were just in Coolidge this morning and talking about expanding that airport there and how important that is to the multimodal transportation that the Congressman was outlining, where we're going to be transporting goods that are manufactured here by rail, by plane, by trucking. I-11, of course, is so important to that. But the big crucial issue coming up this year is the Highway Trust Fund. So we've been funding that trust fund, which does maintenance and repairs on the highways, by a fuel tax. And because now cars don't use as much gas, we have hybrids that don't use any gas, that fund is almost depleted. And so we're trying to figure out a way to revitalize the Highway Trust Fund, because if we don't invest in maintenance and repair of our roads in this nation, it becomes a national security problem. So I'd love to hear from our participants, any ideas you have about what you're willing to do to replenish the Highway Trust Fund.
Very good.